I hope you all have a great morning. So I would like to introduce one of our first speakers of today, Arun Prabhakar. So Arun is a security consultant in the DevSecOps practice at Security Compass. He has forceful experience in secure system development, lifecycle, including secure design, threat modeling, vulnerability management, and solutioning across different domains and platforms. So today, Arun will talk about MLSecOps. So MLSecOps is a new and upcoming approach proposed by security professionals to inject security in the model lifecycle so as to address threats identified even before the model is into production. So please give a warm welcome to Arun Prabhakar.
Okay. Thank you so much, Corey and David and the entire team of TMLS, including the organizing committee. You all have been doing a fabulous job, and thank you once again. And hello and greetings, everyone. MLSecOps. All right. First of all, I welcome you all to the world of security. Some of you must be very knowledgeable with the different domains and techniques of security, but for most of you, security, especially from the perspective of data science and machine learning, must be relatively new. And that too, when it comes to productionizing your model, like continuously training your model, continuously building them, and continuously evaluating your model, security would have been a secondary goal. So for today's session, we are going to do some reprioritization and keep security as a primary goal, with the focus going to be more on security and how security gets integrated with the continuous everything that you are doing as part of your MLOps, primarily the MLOps lifecycle. In the next 30 minutes, let's learn about how to secure the model development lifecycle. And I'm super excited to present on a topic that involves two favorite subjects of mine, security and machine learning, to all the practitioners who are experts in building models. Well, I believe everyone is able to hear me good. And all right. And I'll take your questions towards the end. Okay. With regards to me, my name is Arun Prabhakar. I'm a product security architect and a DevSecOps consultant. I'm also a security data scientist with a primary focus on threat science and threat intelligence, and learning other concepts every day to do better and contribute more in the space. I have 14 years of experience in information security across a range of platforms and domains. Well, that's a quick one about my profile and keeping that to a minimum. And the topic that we have for today is much bigger and important one. So let's discuss about that in detail and jump onto the topic. And before we do so, a very polite request to you all. The slides are going to be more security focused, especially on the process side, with more jargons and concepts, which may be new to most of you, but I will do my best to make it easier for you all. And of course, I've carefully crafted the words and message accordingly. So please bear with me, and I can guarantee on one thing, that the session is going to help you integrate security into your MLOps pipeline and make your existing process more secure so as to protect them from the adversaries or hackers and even adhere to all the mandatory regulations. All right, MLSecOps. Fancy term, right? But let's start asking the questions. What is MLSecOps? Let's spend some time in this slide because this is going to be most important for us. And to answer this what aspect of MLSecOps, we will break this terminology. First of all, MLOps, you're all familiar with this topic. I should say that most of the concepts of MLOps from a process perspective are inherited from the world of DevOps, with the primary benefits being speed and agility to the market, the ability to scale your product and give continuous releases. So that is a continuous effort that needs to be invested throughout the life cycle. The same concept of doing things continuously in your model lifecycle is your MLOps, with the idea of merging the machine learning and the operational aspects together. The major areas of doing things continuously is exactly what you get to see over here, the continuous integration, CI, CD, and CT. CI, where the effort is spent on integrating the different components, including the continuous testing and validating your data, the data schemas even. Continuous delivery, in this the focus is on continuously deploying the services based on the promises made to the customer. And continuous training, here the focus is on making the model outcome better, be it your accuracy or any other evaluation metrics. And you're all experts using some of these techniques, including the incremental learning or updatable classifiers, so I'm not getting into that. Now that in a nutshell or at a high level is MLOps. Now the second question is, where does security get integrated? And that's where I wanted to introduce you all the concept of SecOps. So what is SecOps? Before going there, let me tell you this. Security is a process. Security activities are carried out throughout the life cycle of a project. And in the case of SecOps, we do a series of activities that protects our assets, especially during the post-deployment phases. So to say, all these activities that you see under here, the SecOps, are carried out after the design and the development phases, and the activities performed by the SecOps team includes, and not limited to these three: the continuous scanning, where the threat and the vulnerability teams come in with our scanners, scanning the assets used in the architecture for technology and platform specific issues. Continuous monitoring, we have the concept in security called the first line of defense, where the firewall administrators or the security operations center or the data loss prevention team, all these teams continuously try to monitor the assets used in the architecture, primarily to keep the hackers and the adversaries away who try to inject the malwares and the trojans. And the continuous auditing is where like the regulatory and the compliance team check in to see if all the standards and the regulations are up to date. So that is primarily the InfoSec auditor's job. And now it is easier for us. Both the definition and the intent of both these activities, the MLOps and the SecOps, is over here available to understand the concept of MLSecOps. Basically, this is the injection of security into the MLOps pipeline. All right. I think everyone is hearing me good. And yeah. Now, the question is, why MLSecOps? Keep in mind, cyber attacks are inevitable. These attacks pose a huge threat to the enterprises, and the organizations find it very hard once they are attacked and to recover from such attacks. The impact results in loss of reputation, integrity that the customers have on your machine learning model, and the services that you offer. Everything is being lost in a fraction of a second. Now, MLSecOps is certainly a way to protect all of these from happening, more from a process perspective, so we can understand that security is becoming a mandate and certainly not a choice. All right, the why part is clear. Now, how MLSecOps is going to be accomplished? Now, this is something that we are going to see in detail in the following slide. All right, so security in model lifecycle. I'll quickly have a check over here. Okay. Now, data scientists and machine learning practitioners, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this figure. This is taken from the research paper called The Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning System. It talks about the different elements of machine learning system. There are so many things that go into the making of a machine learning model, but the important thing to note here is the model deployment that happens after this. And here we go. We all have multiple options for deploying the model that we have built. At least the ones that I'm familiar and super comfortable doing it myself are these three items. The API, where the model is being exposed and the endpoint could be consumed directly by our customers. Or going the virtualization way, the model can be Dockerized and shipped to the customers, or the cloud way, where the Kubernetes cluster is being used to productionalize our model into the cloud. Okay, the deployment layer is here, and after this comes the security layer, which is always an afterthought, right? Unfortunate, but that's the truth. The security is always done at the last. The security layer does the required assessment to the model that is deployed, and the security at this layer is typically done by the SecOps team. So there are two questions that come over here, right? What sort of activities are being done here? What basically happens over here? And what sort of outcome that we get out of this security layer? Now, to answer the first question, what happens here? The security mechanisms that you see over here are the ones which are going to be done at the security layer. The IAM or the IDAM are nothing but the identity and access management tools that takes care of the access made to your model and the privilege the users get out of your model. The vulnerability scanning is done on all your endpoints. The intrusion detection prevention mechanisms are going to prevent all the malware from entering in. And of course, there are many more audits and other security stuff that are being performed here. Overall, the security mechanisms involve a combination of tools and manual methods. Now, with regards to the second question, what sort of outcome that we are going to get out of the security layer? And here you see a sample of issues. There are a good number of security issues that are discovered by the SecOps team, which we saw in the previous slide. Now, what you see here again is just a sample of the issues discovered. I'm not going to detail this because this by no means is an exhaustive list of issues. And all these are generic and not always applicable to your models. And of course, talking about the security issues and the respective controls are not the intent of the session. But the most important thing to note here is that all these issues are discovered post-deployment stages of the model. In other words, the threats and the vulnerabilities that are internal to the model are not discovered by the SecOps team. So this brings an important question. Is the job done? Right? And the clear and the loud answer is not yet, and let's see why. I hope everyone is on track until now. We'll follow, we'll learn more. So this brings us to the next slide to answer and understand why the SecOps activities alone are not enough for our model security or protecting our model. Real-time security threats inside the model. Once again, let's bring up the same figure which you all are super comfortable with. Again, from a reference standpoint, the figure is taken from the research paper called the Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning System, which talks about the several elements of a machine learning model. But what are the threats that reside inside these ML systems? What are the vulnerabilities that could be exploited by the adversaries or hackers? And here we go. Poisoning attacks, inference attacks, model stealing attacks, exploiting your software dependencies, supply chain issues, model inversion, perturbation attacks. And I don't have much space in my slide to put a lot of these threats, but this by no means is going to be the complete list of issues. All the attacks that you see here are practically possible and have been discovered and their approach being detailed. Now, if you notice, these attacks are a lot different from what we saw in the last slide where the SecOps team discovers those, right? The SecOps team, which typically employs the traditional security mechanisms like your firewall or the IDAM, would not be able to discover many of these threats. I mean, the threats that happen inside of the model. I'm not going into the details of all this, like the model poisoning or stealing or inversion. As I said, that's not going to be the intent of the session. We are going to focus a little differently, more from the process perspective. So now the big question, how to discover these threats? The short answer is threat modeling, an activity that I have been doing for a long time now. But what is threat modeling? It is a practice to essentially assess the threats in the system, evaluate the eventual risk from a technical perspective and from the perspective of business, with the goal of identifying what can be made, what can be done to make those risks acceptable. And to understand threat modeling in detail, I'm going to give a paper as a reference because that talks about how threat modeling can be done and how to accomplish the maturity as you practice threat modeling. All right. And if you ask me why this is important to you, because even though it is the security professional who performs threat model, it is an activity that is performed in close coordination with the assistance of data scientists. So you should know at a high level the what is what of threat modeling. All right. Now, how to remediate these threats? That is another important question. And keep in mind there may be specific security controls for the potential threats identified in your model, but the way you approach at fixing it matters. And that's where we have to follow the SG3 approach, the secure by design, the secure by default, and the secure by deployment. Secure by design meaning that basically ensuring that your overall design of your model is secure, and secure by default is to ship an ML model that is secure enough out of the box. And secure by deployment means the system is maintainable once your model is being consumed by the customers. Now, that is a third and a final question in this slide as to how to proactively all the threats, how to overcome all the threats proactively. And that's exactly, the answer for that is the shift-left strategy. And that's coming up in detail in the next slide. But before we proceed, my friends, don't worry about all this because this is the job role of the security expert who should effectively guide you in carrying out this process, be it establishing your security process, owning the threat model, the threat modeling execution, telling the data scientists what threats threats persist in your model and the remedies that will have to be applied, how to manage the risk accordingly, and even all these aspects of the whole MLSecOps process are performed by the security professional. Then if you ask me, why is this being told to the data scientist? Because that security professional is doing all this work on your ML model by closely working with you, the data scientists and the machine learning engineers, to secure your model and to build the integrity of your machine learning model. So the next question arises, Arun, is there something that the data scientists are completely comfortable of? And that's where the shift-left aspect of MLSecOps come in, where your involvement is going to be much more. All right, so shift-left security. Cool. Now the crux of the whole session starts from this slide. Okay, the figure resembles the DevOps process with the different phases of DevOps. Most of the phases would remain the same in any enterprises following the MLOps process. Just to make things clearer, that this is not the ML lifecycle. You all are very familiar with the ML lifecycle, but the MLOps lifecycle is what we are talking about here, where there is a collaborative effort happening along with different other teams in the enterprises and not just the data scientists. So there are other stakeholders with different other responsibilities who are involved in this. But the way security gets integrated, especially from the perspective of shift-left approach, is interesting. And here we go with the different categories of security in the MLOps pipeline. Security in the pipeline, security for the pipeline, and security of the pipeline. Now it looks like I'm having some fun with the word security, but not really. You'll see how this comes into action. With regards to security of the pipeline, we will deal with the following that you see over here. Be it the security of the code repository, where your model code resides, your data dump resides, or security of the orchestration platform, the tools that are being used throughout the MLOps lifecycle, or the security of third-party tools that are going to help you in your model development. All these are going to be done. Security activities are going to be done as part of your security of the pipeline. Now, this is mostly on the responsibility of your SecOps team, with some assistance from you, I would say. Yeah. Now, with regards to security for the pipeline, following are the activities that you see over here. All these activities are done by a security architect or by a security expert most of the time, and again, with some involvement from you. They're all done for securing the whole MLOps pipeline. Do not want to bombard you with all the activity definitions over here and the outcome. We already saw what threat modeling is, and that's one important activity that will have to be done rigorously to discover all the threats that you saw in the previous slide, right? And lastly, with regards to security in the pipeline, this is the segment where all the activities that you see must be done by you data scientists and only by you. If you are a data scientist, machine learning engineer, or data engineer, or for that matter, a developer writing some logic to build the client server application, then all these activities that you see over here, like the security as a code, privacy as a code, compliance as a code, all these must be done by you. And of course, all these based on the applicability in your program. Just highlighting the same for you so that you can keep focused only on the things which are on the onus of you. And if you ask me, what should I do? How should I do this? How should I accomplish the whole security in the pipeline? Let me elaborate that part to you in the following slide. But before we move on, there is another thing called the fourth element, which is called security beyond the pipeline. I'm not detailing this purposefully because this is very specific to the leaders in your organization, which is primarily to do with the resourcing, be it the human resourcing, tool resourcing, the budget that is required for setting up the whole security program and the security in your MLOps pipeline, the cultural shift that is required with regards to practicing security, right? The infrastructure for your security program, and a lot of other things. But again, this is more for the managers, and the other three are from the execution aspect where there will be your involvement. Once again, take a look at the complete picture, and all these categories of security are very important, and collectively the different teams in the enterprises will have to come together in securing your data science project. All right, I hope things are going well. And shift-left security for ML engineers and data scientists. What is shift-left security? Shift-left refers to moving security sooner in the model building process. Again, security, I've told this time and again that security is a process. So it is not about using just a couple of tools or doing a few activities in the early phases of the life cycle, but it is all about the cultural shift of incorporating security, early on in the life cycle or early on in the whole ML process. We will see how this is accomplished. So let's move on. Codifying security in your model. What does this mean by saying codifying security? That means whatever we saw in the last slide, the security as a code, the compliance as a code, all this will have to be codified in your model when you do the model building or the model evaluation and the applications leveraging your model. So the security will even get incorporated even by the application that are even leveraging your model. Let's see that in detail. This is going to be super important for you also. I would request your attention, please. At first, write the logic to implement all your security principles, like planning your defensive layers or implementing the logging mechanism, assigning permissions to the users on who could access your model or relevant parts of your model. Implementing the security principles will help in securing the confidential data handled by your model and provides model integrity, which is going to prevent a lot of threats, which you saw in one of the slides, right? You may also have to write the logic to integrate your model with a third-party security tool that provides defensive mechanisms like your authentication, authorization, or accountability. Typically, we call it as the AAA mechanisms. Now, this is what I mean as codifying or codifying security. Secondly, all the security requirements must also be codified. The security requirements are applicable to your models largely based on the important attributes like the geography of deployment, the industry vertical for which your models are deployed, or for that matter, even the organization-specific security policies. All this will have to be codified when you build your model. So it's just not the functionality that is important or the business case for which you are developing the model. Along with it comes a lot of other security requirements which must be incorporated. Okay, I can give one example from a geography perspective of what codifying security requirement means. Let's say if the consumers of your model are based out of California, then California Consumer Privacy Act has specific privacy requirements around the concepts of data anonymizations, data minimalization, and other privacy aspects that must be handled in your MLOps process. I took the example of CCPA, but if you're based out of Canada, then from a privacy standpoint, it is PIPEDA. Or if you're based out of European Union, then it's going to be all your GDPR requirements. So based on the geography of deployment, you will have to incorporate the appropriate security requirements. So the privacy requirements are completely based on geography, but the point to note here is the regulatory violations are very expensive. So it is not only the threats that we saw in one of the earlier slides, but it's also the regulatory requirements. And if you're non-compliant upon doing an audit, then the expenses are going to be more. So if I were to wear my security auditor hat, then I would say I would give the utmost importance to codifying regulatory requirements in the machine learning model early on in the life cycle. All right, and lastly, yes, every phase of the data science program needs to be secure and must be codified. Be it your data collection, data cleaning, data analysis, feature engineering, model building, or even the data evaluation. For that matter, some of the reporting capabilities that you do as part of your model building, all this will have to be codified with the appropriate security tools, mechanisms, requirements. Keep in mind the security requirements will have to be thoroughly understood and codified throughout your model lifecycle in all phases of your ML model. All right, now that we have learned the art of, at least understood the art of codifying security in the models, so this is the expectation from you data scientists and the ML engineers to codify security throughout all the phases of the machine learning model, incorporating security principles, security requirements, and integrating security tools. All right. And now some big questions. How is security being incorporated in the enterprise? Number one. Number two, we learned about securing the model, right? This talks about codifying security in the model. So we learned about securing the model and the model lifecycle. But how is security being practiced in the MLOps pipeline, which is a much bigger picture than just the model lifecycle? Third, how is security being practiced continuously in the MLOps pipeline? Remember, it's not just a one-time go, do it one time and then just forget it. Security is a process. It has to be done religiously, and that's exactly where the continuous security in the MLOps pipeline comes next. Achieving continuous security in the MLOps pipeline. What we are seeing here is how to achieve the continuous security throughout the pipeline. Remember, your ML model is an integral part of the MLOps pipeline, and in this figure, I made the MLOps lifecycle phases a bit linear, right? For our understanding, whatever we saw as an infinity figure in the previous slide is being made a little linear. And these are the high-level phases that you find with most MLOps pipeline, at least from a generic standpoint, I can say. You will notice along with the data science and ML teams, there are certainly other application teams that get integrated in the pipeline, just like the QA or performance teams and their activities, or the security team and their activities also get integrated and get codified at different phases of the pipeline. Secure requirements in the plan phase, the security verification tools that get integrated in the testing phase, the integration logic will have to be codified, the continuous learning and the continuous feedback. Those are basically the MLOps principle inherited from the DevOps principles, I can say. Even those principles will also have to be codified, mostly in the form of tools or process as a code, concepts like this. Keep in mind, this is the big picture, right? And your ML logic is going to become an integral part of the whole MLOps pipeline. My humble request to you all is not to feel overwhelmed, because we are talking about MLSecOps in the complete pipeline, and all these are not done by just the data scientists alone. It is a team effort and collectively done with the security professionals, DevOps engineers, cloud SMEs, maybe domain experts, business analysts, quality assurance engineers, and there are very many other roles that comes into play when you talk about the whole MLOps pipeline. But remember, in the first figure that we discussed, right, the codifying security in the model, that will be on the onus of the data science team, because you data scientists are accountable for the model that is developed, that is even designed and evaluated. So you are going to be responsible for the codifying security in the model. But in the second figure, the model becomes an integral part of the MLOps pipeline. So a collaborative and continuous effort will have to be invested by every team in the enterprise, including the data science team. Now, this was all conceptual to you. Now we will see a very detailed and practical example in the following slide. And that will be the last slide as well. So, all right, I'll answer all those questions. Shift-left security in MLSecOps. So this is a good example, and a lot of examples and tool usage and techniques are over here. So please pay close attention. This probably is going to answer one of the questions that is coming up in the chat channel as well. Take a look at this. Here we are getting to see how a business requirement is getting converted into a technical security requirement, with directions and procedures identified for the data scientists to apply the right security controls. For our example scenario, I've taken a specific case from the GDPR regulation, a specific article from GDPR regulation that requires data validation on all internal and external user input, right? And you get to see that in the last part of this particular picture. For those of you who want to know what data validation is, it is essentially a technique that allows the user to enter only the valid characters that are permissible by the model to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your machine learning model. And we saw in one of the slides earlier, the security attacks like the data poisoning attacks, model inversion. There are also model poisoning attacks, supply chain issues. So your data validation will certainly help prevent many of them. So the question is, how does this requirement get implemented? And here we go. What we are seeing here is like the data validation requirement getting converted into the data validation implementation in the complete MLOps pipeline. I've tried to put this figure as per the MLOps pipeline comprising all the phases, whatever we saw in the last slide, the different phases of MLOps pipeline, the same is what you're all seeing here as well. And let's understand that a bit more detail. Data validation control can be achieved using a bunch of security techniques like the whitelisting, blacklisting, output encoding, and even doing a bit of logging. It's exactly what you get to see in the top left corner of this particular picture that you see over here. Right? Okay, so this is basically being pumped by a lot of these security requirements tool that are open source and commercial security requirements tool, which keep telling you how to accomplish a particular control. Data validation is something that you will find, but then you need to know what exactly the techniques and tools over here are, and what even whitelisting, how does whitelisting snippet, or you need some kind of a code snippet for how to apply that in Python or R or stuff like that. So some kind of security tool is certainly going to help you with that. And as you go into the next phases, the build, the code, and the test, you will see that there are a lot of security tools. All these security tools at every phase will help you automate the different jobs for accomplishing data validation. Right? Basically, the 3 different security jobs, the whitelisting, blacklisting, and encoding, all these are getting codified, and security is being accomplished continuously throughout the MLOps pipeline through the use of security tools and techniques. Keep in mind that the tools and the tooling and leveraging the cloud helps you with automation and is the preferred way to address many security aspects. I'm not going into the detailing of that implementation because that is a lot of time, but this is a snapshot of what actually happens in the security side on the MLOps pipeline. And you're seeing that security is being practiced continuously in the MLOps pipeline and is being adopted early on in the MLOps lifecycle. So that accomplishes the goal of the shift-left security. Sorry. Right. I'm sure this gives you an idea of what MLSecOps is and shifting left MLSecOps is, primarily by shifting left all your security activities and practicing security throughout the lifecycle, accomplishing the important control of data validation, satisfying the business requirement and the regulatory requirement. And yeah, if you are a data scientist or ML engineer, the highlighted portion is what you will see here, with the primary focus from the perspective of the data validation on your models, the data collection phase, or the feature engineering phase, or the model development phase. Your data validation will have to be incorporated in all the phases of the model lifecycle. And as I said, your model lifecycle is an integral part of the MLOps pipeline. So this part will have to be addressed by you data scientists continuously and not just once. Okay. So finally, with regards to the question on how it benefits me, here we go. The data validation actually protects you from the legal implications, helps ensure the model integrity is being taken care of, or there are no performance impact from an availability perspective, right? And it is actually a defense for all your model poisoning, model inversion, many injection attacks, and of course, it is going to be practiced continuously throughout the life cycle, right? So that is all about the MLSecOps being practiced early on in the life cycle. And this is how all the tooling and the relevant concepts coming into play. From a business mandate, we saw how the regulatory requirement came out of it and the control is being identified, how the data validation control that has been identified is being implemented, what exactly is the role of the data scientist over here. And if you ask me, in what way it protects me, it protects you from a good bunch of security issues over here. I do have the best practices, but then I will take some of the questions over here. Is it okay if I do the data best practices, or probably should I just give it answer the questions first and then?
It's like you prefer. So if you want to start talking about your last slide, feel free to do so, and we can jump on the questions. Just
all right. All right, that's good. The last slide of the presentation, I'll try to emphasize only a few of them over here. Continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous training. It looks like those are the three important things from the MLOps pipeline. But then there are, continuous, probably, assessments that you will have to do, continuous training, continuous feedback, knowledge management. All this will have to be done continuously, and that's exactly is the continuous everything. And along with the continuous everything, practice also the continuous security, because it's not that like you develop your model once and deploy it. In the world of agile, and in the world of the continuous requirement being posed by your customers, certainly you need to build things continuously. And when you do all of this, I'm saying like do practice security also continuously. Perform threat models. As I said, the threat modeling execution may be on the onus of your security professional, but the security professional cannot do something on their own. They need to work with you. They need to work with the data engineers, understand the system in detail, understand the deployment scenario, understand the very many aspects of the complete MLOps lifecycle, so that all the potential threats can be discovered, and it becomes a chance for you to address all of them in the early phases of the lifecycle. Monitor your security architecture. There are so many things, right? There are so many building blocks. If you take a complex architecture, data coming in from one component, data moving from another component, there is data stored in one component, model is actually stored in another component. So you need to understand the complete flow of the whole architecture, so that like you can secure the data in transit, secure the data while it is being processed, secure the model even while it is being stored somewhere. So monitor your security architecture. It's a very ever-changing world, I can say. Things keep changing now and then. So keep monitoring your security architecture. Get trained in secure coding. That is something that we are all like not very comfortable, right? Like today we can write some kind of, anybody can develop model. Even as we speak, like there are a lot of people developing model, but then how many of us can write secure model? That is something which is super important. Automate everything. You saw in the previous slide how many tools are coming into picture. It's just a sample. Even for the case of data validation, probably that's a small thing. But in the real world, like there are so many tools going to come into picture. Maybe you can say like that's the role of DevOps engineer, but then like without you, because like it is your model, you are letting someone into your home, right? So you just got to make sure that you cooperate with them and they are doing their job to make the complete model and lifecycle secure. Knowledge management, note down all your experiences, involve security champion. That's basically something like your security expert or your security professional who will guide you in the process, because this is just not a technical concept. In fact, yesterday I saw a very good session coming from Navdeep and Michelle, if I'm right. They talked about the different security threats that exist, all the model poisoning, different kind of security threats, and they talked about the remedies that need to be applied. That's more on the technical front, but you got to apply that continuously. It's not like do it once and you just move on. So when you do that continuously, you're framing a process, and that's exactly when the MLSecOps kind of a concept comes into picture, right? So some kind of helpful references, and I think we should really take the questions now.
Great. So thank you so much, Arun, for this inspiring talk on MLSecOps. I will also open up the session for Q&A. I see there are already a few questions. I also want to remind all of you there is a poll, so don't hesitate to answer the poll just next to the chat button, whether you find session helpful. And so we'll start maybe with questions. There are a few questions. So do you have, Arun, some reading recommendation for MLSecOps? Can you share a good introduction reference to codifying security in model?
All right. So there are a bunch of things. First of all, this topic is like really huge. I'm sure even as I speak, I could see like there are a lot of elements that we are talking about, just not security, just not ML or the ops perspective. There are a lot of things coming to picture. So, if you just go back to the previous slide, you are seeing like, you got to do threat model, you got to do secure coding, you got to practice the whole concepts of DevOps, because like a lot of DevOps principle is what like we are inheriting from. So I have just tried to put together some references. I just tried to prioritize them. Again, I don't want to bombard you. Also, threat modeling is one thing. I'll probably share these links immediately in the channel. So that's one thing that you may also have to, you may have to really look into, understand it at a high level. You cannot, straight away go and start discovering some threats, but understand what threat model is and see if you can really collaborate with the security person so that like you help them and they help you discover all the threats. The remedies are even going to come out of the threat model, because once you identify the threat, the remedies are like the low-hanging fruits, because what you need to know is like, what are issues that I have. Once you know the issue, you can get to understand the remedies. And yeah, this one, the second link, right? That's from Microsoft, and I have really been benefited by reading that particular link. A lot of useful materials there. Some kind of security fundamentals, because like we are talking a lot about these tools, security tools, this tool, requirement generation tool, security testing tool, and some kind of cloud security tool. So OAS was actually going to have a lot of these projects and some tools. So we also have a chapter here in every place, literally globally. So you can see if you can get benefited by reading some of the materials there. And DevSecOps principles are something which is really important. So that's going to come from the last link.
Thank you. There's also Rajiv Abam, who is asking whether there are Python libraries or non-Python domain-specific languages that basically integrate with Python to import either security policies, specific policies, and enforce policies.
You're right. That's a lot of questions, because we are talking about data validation, authentication, authorization, accountability. So all these are different. In fact, not even just subjects; they are different domains by themselves. Depending on,
feel free to pick one.
I would say, like, that's exactly the reason why I said, like, just don't go with randomly picking some kind of security thing. The first place over here, right? The security requirements, they are supposed to be properly identified for your project, right? Only if you identify the security requirements, you can even say whether even authentication is really required for your project or not, or data validation is required for your project or not. Remember, you're doing something like a minimum viable product and giving it only to trusted users, like your partners or vendors who are very trustworthy people. So data validation kind of a requirement may not be a priority, but when you go to the public, data validation kind of requirement will be a super priority. So the security requirements is a mandate over here, and that kind of a tool will actually help you what security control defensive mechanism to focus on. So I wouldn't really want to do cherry picking here. I gave some kind of an examples. There are probably some, I have seen some kind of libraries in Python, but don't really recall something on top of my mind. But just don't like that, just like that, don't go. You just need to have the proper security requirements identified in the first place.
That makes sense. And then maybe the last two questions for this session. I will ask you both of them, and I'll let you answer them in the order you want. So the first one is about security in the cloud. So how does this security is taken care in the cloud platform? Does it stay same, or cloud provider takes care of it? So that's the first question. There's a second question about the evaluation. So as a practitioner, how do you evaluate how secure an external tool is that you're trying basically to integrate your existing code with?
All right. So to answer the first question, I'm sure, like, as part of your SLAs, you would identify who takes care of what. In the world of security, we have something called vulnerability management, patch management, and configuration management. So when you are moving to the cloud, you will have to make sure, like, these activities are on the onus of the cloud vendor, or is it on the onus of the basically on you. So if it is on the onus of cloud vendor, make sure the vulnerability management is being done periodically, probably once in 3 months or once in 6 months. The patch management, whenever some kind of an attack comes, be it on the endpoints that are being exposed, or be it on some of the Dockers, make sure that the cloud vendor is immediately patching that up on the server on which like your model is being deployed. So you just got to sign the SLAs accordingly, make sure like who's taking care of what. And as a practitioner, how do you evaluate how secure an external tool is that you are trying to? Okay, so this actually is on the onus of security team, so don't worry about it. If you have a security team, they will tell you, they will do a third-party audit from different parameters, right from the business level all the way to the code level, to see if they have got all the right controls in place. And once the due diligence is done, then certainly it is that external tool could be on you. So even from a business trend, you will have to do some kind of NDA and stuff like that. So that's completely on delegated to the security practitioner. So don't worry about that.
Very much so. First, I would like to thank you again for that amazing, insightful talk. Don't hesitate if you have some references to drop them in the chat. So I hope you all have a great day and see you to the next session.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank you.